From the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Our topic for today's program is learning resources, the future of telecommunications. Many of our fine viewers are very aware that we're going through a communications revolution, and this is a very small planet with the telecommunications that we have, where we can get instant responses to developments around the world, including in the field of education with this new technology. It's my pleasure to welcome to the program to discuss this exciting issue Bill Strader, who is the Director of Learning Resources at North Idaho College, and he comes to us with very highly qualified credentials to discuss this important question. Our guest holds a BA degree from Montana State University in the field of the social sciences. He also holds a master's in library science and information management from the USC, or the University of Southern California. Bill, welcome to our program, and I want to tell our viewers that we're very pleased that this particular program, the North Idaho College Public Forum, is housed in your area of learning resources at North Idaho College, and we also thank you for your support of what we believe is important to communicate to the people in the Northwest.
Well, and thank you for inviting me and having me here today. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It is equal pleasure to have our regular panelists. First of all, Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and Janelle Burke will commence today's questioning.
Mr. Strader, it's a pleasure to have you here and to talk about this important subject. Can you tell us, what does learning resources mean and who is involved in that? What are some of the components of learning resources?
Yes, here at North Idaho College, learning resources actually has several responsibilities. Perhaps the one that your viewers would be most familiar with is library services. Here at North Idaho College, library services are provided to students and in support of faculty and their curriculum. We also have a wider mission where we support student needs from Lewis Clark State College, University of Idaho. We collaborate and cooperate with area libraries throughout the Northwest. And actually, many people in the greater Coeur d'Alene, North Idaho area use us as a regular library facility. So we do see our mission as having a considerable amount of outreach and being disseminators of information, if you will. In addition to that, learning resources also includes a component referred to here as instructional technology. Now we're beginning to utilize those learning technologies in the application of classroom settings. So we have a strong component of supporting faculty, perhaps in the presentation of their courseware, in the delivery of multiple medias, video here being a good example of that, or digitizing photographs so that they can be loaded into computers and presented to students in a traditional classroom setting. In addition to that, we have an emerging responsibility, but not a sole responsibility. We work in all of these arenas in a collaborative fashion with a number of faculty and departments here on campus and throughout the community as well. But we are also then entering into an era of distance education delivery, or learning at a distance. And learning resources has an evolving and growing responsibility in support of that. And video is one way of providing learning resources to students wherever they may be they here on campus, here within the community, or at any considerable distance. And the technology of today actually would allow us the capacity to be connecting globally, anywhere in the world, if you will.
Now, I know that you've talked just about North Idaho College at this point, but this is something that's pretty familiar to institutions in other places as well. Is that true?
Oh, that's very true, right. And in fact, North Idaho College might not be seen as a pioneer in this area, but I do believe that we are an early adopter of this technology. Education at a distance probably has spanned quite a length of time, but the way we see it today more specifically means the incorporation of digitized audio, video, and you are delivering that through generally a compressed video signal. If you will, you're taking a television signal and putting it through a telephone line. And so wherever an individual is with modem access, connectivity to this hardware, why then they can be live and interactive in a learning and teaching environment. This has been a developing trend nationwide, not just here in Idaho and not in the Pacific Northwest, but it generally is a national trend. And I would say that it was further fostered by the interest of the federal government, particularly the Clinton-Gore administration, in developing a nationwide infrastructure, the information superhighway, if you will. And this is now a very specific delivery of what can you do by putting courseware onto that information superhighway.
Steve Sheen.
Bill, so much of what we're talking about today in terms of learning resources and distance education is pretty high-tech stuff. Digitized video signals sent over phone lines and that sort of thing. But I wonder if you could take a few minutes and take us through something of the evolution of learning resources going back to its earliest forms.
Well, thank you, Steve. I come to you with a background in history, and not really an expert in the field, but one of adopting to what has occurred here recently, technologically speaking. But if we think back through time, ancient people really had an oral tradition. So all of their business dealings, all of their medical needs, if you will, all of their spirituality, a lot of what was knowledge at that time, or accumulated knowledge at that time, really was primarily stored in memory. And so then it was shared orally through oral traditions. And right here in Coeur d'Alene, I'm sure in the longhouses of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, there was quite a rich knowledge and shared experience through an oral tradition. But at some point in time in the development of civilization, learning resources then began to move into making a permanent record of that, if you will. And of course, prior to the Greeks, there were the inscriptions on clay tablets that, again, accounted for man's accumulated knowledge. Later, we saw the emergence of the Greek civilization with the writings of Aristotle and the accumulations of vast amounts of information now being held in scrolls, if you will. The Alexandria Library in Egypt at that time, a part of the greater Greek Empire, housed 10,000 scrolls of information. From there, of course, it was quite an advancement in technology when the Gutenberg created the printing press. And what was so remarkable at that time was now you were taking alphabetical letters that all had a uniformity of size, and that type could be movable. At this point, then, you were able to produce vast amounts of information quite economically, and you could then begin to disseminate that to a wider audience. So again, you can see a further evolution of learning resources with the dissemination of information to an ever wider body of students and learning. And then that again played itself out quite clearly in the setting of higher learning when universities were being formed throughout most of Europe during the 11th and 12th century, or if you will, as the Renaissance was really in full development. And at that point in time, there was again a further standardization of communication, if you will, through the adoption of Latin as really the language of learning. So with so many peoples of such great diversity, where could they find common ground? But they found common ground with the adoption of Latin as the language. Well, here today, the common ground, if you will, is the adoption of technology, be it at a community level, be it at a K-12 setting, be it at the university, government, community college level. So the way we are now beginning to transfer information, just as what was occurring with the adoption of the printing press and the movable type, now we have an adoption of compressed video so that we can be delivering teaching and learning and courseware through the adoption of this technology.
Thank you.
It's really exciting to hear you talk about how the human race started with trying to just develop a language so they could communicate, and now how we have all of this hardware and technology. What an evolutionary process to communicate around the world. But still, we're in the infancy of some of this technology and what it's going to do globally.
Well, that is so very true. And to describe to you some of the complexity of the day, North Idaho College was pleased to be awarded significant grant funds through the Economic Development Administration, close to $1 million, I believe. This was also met with further matching funds at the state level, state of Idaho, through vocational education, some amount in excess of $600,000.
This is going on at a lot of places all over the country, and even other countries, this technology to hook us all together.
That is very true. Normally when you're at home and viewing a TV, you think that it's a signal that is coming into your set. But more and more with the digitization of information, what really is happening is that that is being computerized and being driven by computers and not by transmitters. So just here on this college campus, why we have to have 3 different types of computers and software, if you will, be able to communicate and talk to each other in order then to be providing that opportunity for simultaneous conferencing or classrooms in remote locations. The sophistication is so great that at this point we could actually be delivering 30 different classes simultaneously, or we could be delivering that same class to 30 separate locations. That's a part of our grant development here.
Let's talk about something that some of our viewers might not be as familiar with as you. And when you work with it every day, it's easy to understand that some terminology needs to be explained. When we talk about downlink and uplink, that's what you're talking about here concerning the delivery of courses to this campus or away from this campus. Would you give us a little more explanation of how that works? And I assume there are other institutions where even more than 30 classes can be taking place simultaneously.
Well, again, your question is a good one, and I answer you as a practitioner more than as an expert. But generally, throughout my career, having adopted this technology, seeing it as a means of delivering further teaching and learning. If we back up just a short time ago, why it was quite remarkable when we were placing satellites in orbit around the Earth, that we then learned that we could transmit signals to that satellite, and that satellite in turn could retransmit that signal back to Earth. So there was an opportunity then for uplinking, or the originating site delivering the program to the transmission off of the satellite, where then that signal was retransmitted back down to Earth, and wherever there were the receiver dishes, why then you could also be accessing that program. Part of this program that a number of your viewers may be watching would be possibly delivered through that kind of technology. So it is one thing to be in a receiving mode. It is a bit more sophisticated to be able to originate that program and to uplink to a satellite. Here at North Idaho College, there is opportunity and capacity to do that, as there is with Boise State University, University of Idaho, Idaho State University. More and more, Idaho, like many of the other western states, are becoming more integrated and more networked in their sharing of this technology and its capability. So uplinking and downlinking of video signals was an early adopted technology of learning resources.
Let me just give our viewers an example. We're talking about in very concrete terms. I had the privilege of teaching a course at North Idaho College where I had students here and another site, and through that technology there are screens in which we can see one another and the students can interchange even though they're at different sites. We also had the privilege of having the congressional delegation from Idaho on an uplink and downlink, in which we had a large audience here, and they were in Washington, D.C., actually at 3 different sites in Washington, D.C., and on different channels on the satellites. We were able, through this magic, to talk with all that congressional delegation and the audience back and forth. So it can be conferences, it can be classes. There are many, or business organizations can use this for conferencing. And my final question before going back to the panel is, what do you see in the future in relation to this kind of examples I've given, where maybe there'll be less traveling and we'll more often communicate and even visually see one another?
Well, again, your experience shows you to be an early adopter of this technology, to your good credit. Yes, for much time, we have been limited by our geography and distance barriers. Here is an opportunity for this technology to remove the isolation, if you will, the geographic barriers, where we, as a global community, can all be at the same place at the same time. And how does that occur? That occurs because of the computerization of the delivery of this information. You can computerize data, you can computerize voice, and you can computerize the visual. So now what we have is an opportunity for students to be talking amongst themselves globally by coming together into an electronic chat room, if you will, just like you would have classroom discussion within the traditional four walls of a traditional classroom. Now, in a sense, you can have students talking with one another interactively, digitally. Another interaction that is possible would be the instructor posting to an electronic bulletin board. So again, then students could go in, see what their assignments were, see where they were as far as progressing in their educational assignments. Another possibility would be, too, that in the delivery of compressed video, you could actually be streaming in video segments. As an example, a student is, or a teacher is teaching auto mechanics or refrigeration and heating. You could have a pre-packaged part of the courseware actually showing the engine being disassembled or the carburetor being reassembled, and through the delivery of the instruction, then this piece of streamed video could be run in so that students, wherever they were, be they on campus or they being far from campus, could be watching this, viewing this through the digitization of this information. There are just a whole host of variations that can be brought to an education at a distance program. Mounting courseware on the web so that you would have internet connectivity to it. You could have, as I said, the compressed video, which allows two-way communication from the class to the originating site so that everyone can be seeing themselves simultaneously, just as we are here present in this studio room, face-to-face, looking at each other. The technology today provides that same capacity, even though Steve might be in Moscow, you might be in Bozeman, and Janelle, you could be over in Seattle. It would still be as if we were virtually in the same room at the same point in time. It really is quite an exciting period.
Janelle Burke.
I have a series of 3 little questions. The first one is to explain, what do you mean when you say digitally? Students would be talking digitally.
Well, that's where then your voice has been translated into a computerized means of communication.
Would you do that by means of fingers or and typing in, or are you thinking it could be also voice communication?
Oh yes, definitely the latter, where you're speaking into a microphone that is connected to software in a computer that then translates that. The fact of the matter is, many times when you're making a long-distance call today, it isn't your voice that the receiving party is really hearing, but it is the software of the telephone industry taking your sound, digitizing it, and actually making it better in some senses than what the original quality of the voice is. So yes, it would be very much in that regard.
Also, when you talk about the teacher-student relationship, how are you going to propose to keep the magic alive that goes on in the classroom where everyone is personally present?
Well, again, I think we've all had the experience in a regular traditional classroom setting of having those instructors, those professors that we thought were truly remarkable and outstanding. And then we've also had ordinary experiences as well. So in my judgment, the technology does nothing to elevate the opportunity of the success of teaching, but then relies on that human factor of who is your instructor, who is the professor, who is the individual preparing that courseware to be instructing you as the student. The beauty of the technology as I see it is that we no longer have to be place-bound, and so therefore I can have that virtual classroom experience with an excellent educator, but I do not have to be right in their immediate presence in order to gain from their knowledge and skills and abilities, if you will.
I would think, this is my third question, I would think that with regard to updating your education, it would be very advantageous to use this kind of an approach, because you could actually get more specific information through this sort of an approach.
Well, again, I think adopting technology like this is suitable at the elementary level. And it's suitable for a program of lifelong learning, so it's as equally an opportunity for senior citizens, those in the workforce who wish to have opportunity for retraining and learning. As another example, here in Idaho, we're adopting a mindset of dual enrollment, where we can have high school students earning high school credit, the Carnegie unit, at the same time be dual enrolled and earning college credit. So this type of technology would be a great boon to all of those audiences, all of those potential students, from elementary clear through to being a senior citizen and still wanting to have that lifelong learning opportunity.
Steve Sheen.
Bill, there's some exciting potential in learning resources and the technology that's been adopted in those areas. But what kind of a burden has that put on people like you, your staff, and on institutions that have to somehow acquire the resources that are necessary to put technology into practice?
Right. I think the challenge is considerable. Let's bring to mind one thing that you always have to have in order to get things done, which is money. So what we are talking about is not cheap. It is of some expense to make a capital investment like this. But again, it shows then, as a society, how in a cooperative spirit we can be blending local resources with governmental programs and bringing those applications to all citizens, irregardless of their economic status, irregardless of their physical location, irregardless of their social setting. So to me, that is of a great challenge, but it is something that does require a significant financial investment. That's been true here at North Idaho College. That is true in any location that is delivering education as a distance through the incorporation of compressed video technology. Another element that is a considerable challenge, I am a part of the graying generation. I did not grow up able to utilize the capacity of a computer. I can recall the first time one was brought into my work area when I was at the Wyoming State Library. I thought, gosh, do I quit today and find another? So for those of us who are graying, it has presented quite a challenge to keep our skills current. The wonderful part is that we have the younger generation who are quickly adapting to this technology and this environment. And oftentimes they can be partners in our teaching and learning, where they can actually be assisting us in understanding and utilizing the technology. I'm excited as to that challenge because we're really preparing them for the world in which they're going to live, and we as mature adults have had a chance to glimpse that future and to help facilitate that growth and development. So I think that that's truly an exciting opportunity.
I'm glad you brought that line of comment up. Let's talk for a minute to the people in the Gap, folks who may remember their local community library as a place with long stacks of books and of course the card catalogs where you looked up things. How difficult would it be for them today? How user-friendly is the new technology that they can take advantage of in the modern library, and particularly in resource and research libraries of today?
Another good question, Steve, and it's becoming more user-friendly. Another element of education as a distance is just the sharing of library resources. It used to be that an individual had to go to their library, be they a local library setting or be they the university library setting. It wasn't unheard of for you to go through the countless drawers of the card catalog searching for what it was that you wanted, author, title, subject-wise. But more and more over recent times, libraries have been collaborating and sharing data. A large part of the credit really is due to the Library of Congress at the national level. They set up MARC, which is referred to as machine readable cataloging, This was then a way to begin to standardize the bibliographic record. It was also a wonderful benefit of that software that it wasn't limited in its fields of information, which meant then that vast amounts of cataloging data could be entered into a computerized record. Well, now we participate here locally in a consortium of shared cataloging data. So it's now very possible for an individual to go into their local library, approach the computer terminal, if you will, and then be searching cataloging databases that might not even be material physically located in their setting, but that they can see that that material is available. They can request that material electronically, and let's just take an example. It's not available here in Coeur d'Alene, but it's available in Portland, Oregon. Then that receiving library, being a cooperative entity, will then transport that book, magazine article, if you will, from the physical location of Portland here to the campus of NIC for student use. Now we can take that a step further, and we can be loading full textual data into significant databases. And because the cost of storage has come down over time, it's now conceivable through the economics, if you will, of information to be storing vast amounts of data. As an example, we could have expanded academic index here on campus where a student then could bring up a journal article and they could see that it was appropriate to their course of study. They could then download the full text of that article right at that computer station. Well, let's take it a step further. If they're in a business location, if they're in their home, if they're in their K-12 school, here's an opportunity with computer, modem, software connectivity to bring all of those learning resources right to your very fingertips. But it does require the application of computerized technology.
I have to interrupt. I have the signal from our staff that we're out of time, and we're bringing the whole world together through this process, and every place can have a large library. What a great note on which to end the program. Bill Strader, the Director of Learning Resources, North Idaho College, thank you for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you've enjoyed our program, and we invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we shall discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.